Hi everyone, welcome to or welcome back to my channel, Knits. My name is Amy and here I talk about all things knitting, and today I have a pattern roundup of 15 patterns that you can knit to gift this holiday season. Well, it's that time of year. It is the middle of November where we all start to think of holiday gifting as the holidays start to come closer to us. If you are a knitter, you might be considering knitting some of your gifts this holiday season. So I wanted to do a roundup of some patterns that I found that I thought would be suitable for gifting this year. These are patterns that I think would both be exciting to knit as a knitter and both practical and exciting to receive as a recipient. There is a variety of patterns and skill levels in this roundup. Some of the patterns are paid, some of them are free, and they are suited for a wide variety of recipients. So all of the patterns I will be mentioning today will be linked down below in the description box. I will also be linking a Ravelry bundle where you can find all of the patterns in one place if that is more convenient for you to use. So let's dive into the patterns. The first category of patterns are hand accessories, and we'll start with the classic pair of mittens. Mittens I feel like are a great thing to gift during the holiday season, especially if you live in a colder climate. Mittens are super practical. They're practical if you need to clear some snow or ice off your car, or while you're driving to work in the morning and your steering wheel is still cold. Mittens are pretty quick to knit, especially if you're using a thicker yarn. And the first mitten pattern that I have to share are the Vanilla Mittens by Kaitlin Barthold, also known as Originally Lovely. Now this is a free pattern you can find on her blog, or you can pay for the ad-free PDF version of the pattern. In terms of design, these mittens are your basic stockinette mittens, hence the name Vanilla Mittens. According to the pattern description, this is a very thoughtful design where both the left and right hands are actually knit differently, so they're more anatomically correct and better fitting. They do feature a fold-over ribbed cuff, and they come in 7 different adult sizes. This is considered an intermediate level knitting pattern. Skills needed include knitting in a small circumference in the round, increases for shaping, decreases, and picking up stitches. There is also a video tutorial for this pattern on YouTube that you can follow completely. The suggested yarn is an Aran weight wool called Originally Lovely Lana, and these mittens are knit on 3.75mm needles to create a very dense and warm fabric. You of course can knit these in one color, but I really like how the sample photo features 2 different colors with an accent on the ribbed cuff. I think it's a really classy way to add some excitement to these pair of mittens. The next pair of mittens that I will share are the Arch Gusset Mittens by Purl Soho. This is also a free knitting pattern, and it comes in a range of sizes that vary from kid all the way to adult extra large. Now these are also your pretty basic stockinette pair of mittens. They do feature a really nice shaping along the gusset, hence the name the Arched Gusset Mittens. So if you're looking for something with a little more knitting, shaping excitement, I think this is the pattern to choose. The recommended yarn that is used is Purl Soho knitting yarn, which is a worsted weight 100% merino yarn. These mittens are knit on 3.75mm needles, and similarly to the mittens I just shared, the skill set is about the same, knitting in a small circumference in the round, increasing, picking up stitches, as well as decreasing. Next up, I have a couple different patterns that are fingerless gloves. Now in the world of technology, I think fingerless gloves are very applicable because you can't really use your cell phone with full-on mittens, so I have a couple patterns of fingerless gloves that I think would be great to gift. The first are the penny gloves by PetiteKnit. Now these are your basic, what you would call vanilla stockinette gloves. They have pretty minimal shaping. It's a pretty basic shape. You have a long cylinder with a little offset area for your thumb. This knitting pattern comes in one size that is meant to fit an adult, and I like how in this pattern the recommended yarn you can go sort of on the luxury side. If you're looking for more of a high-end gift to gift someone, then you can consider using a nice yarn like a cashmere or an alpaca lace. However, you can also just sub any sort of fingering weight yarn to use for these fingerless gloves. Some yarn recommendations in the pattern include Gepard Garn cashmere lace, Filcolana Alva, which is an alpaca lace yarn, or Mondial Deluxe Cashmere. These are knit on 3mm needles, and PetiteKnit rates this pattern difficulty as a 2 out of 5 stars. So you'll have to know how to knit in the round in stockinette, do some increases and picking up stitches, and there's really not much more than that. So also I think somewhat a beginner friendly pattern. Now if you're looking for a fingerless glove pattern that has a little bit more excitement both for you as a knitter and in the finished product, then I would turn you to the Comfy Cabled Fingerless Gloves by Leelee PetiteKnit. These are a gorgeous pair of cabled long fingerless gloves. They have a lot of texture and just look really nice, and I think would look really nice presented as a gift. This pattern is available for free on a blog website, or you can purchase the ad-free PDF version as well. This is a fingering weight pattern knit on 3mm needles, so I would consider this pattern only if you have a little bit of extra time on your hands. This is going to be a longer mitten pattern to make compared to the other ones that I just shared. The suggested yarn for this pattern is Knit Picks Capretta Superwash, which is a fingering weight merino, cashmere, and nylon yarn. So I think the cashmere is going to add a lot of luxe and softness to the finished piece. You can also sub in any fingering weight yarn or fingering weight sock yarn I think would work well. Because this pattern has cabling, I would call this a little bit more of an intermediate to advanced level pattern. You should be comfortable with cables. I did preview the free pattern and it looked like it was all written out. I didn't see any charts, so if you're comfortable working cables on a written out pattern, then you should be good to go. And I do have one more pair of fingerless mittens to share, and these are the School Run Mittens by Laura Penrose. These are, I think, a really cute variation on your basic stockinette fingerless mittens. I love the picot edge design here. You can also see that they are a smaller pair of mittens. They don't cover too much of the wrist, so if you're looking for something really quick to finish, this might be the pattern to choose. This does come in a range of sizes ranging from toddler all the way to adult. There are 3 separate adult sizes, so you can use this pattern for a variety of different recipients. This is considered a light fingering weight pattern. The suggested yarn is Felcolana Arwetta, which is a fingering weight sock yarn, and the construction of this pattern actually involves using both the fingering weight held single and held double, so it is important to use a fingering weight yarn, and you can't just simply sub a DK weight yarn for this pattern. This pattern is knit on both 3mm and 4mm needles. Mostly stockinette. You will have to be comfortable with increasing and shaping and doing the picot edge. And to go with this pattern, I thought it would be cool to transition into things for the head, and the next pattern that I will suggest is the School Run Headband, also by Laura Penrose. You can see this is a matching pattern to the School Run mittens, and it also features that really nice picot edge, and I think if you're gifting a bigger knit set, it would be really cute to pair those mittens and this headband together. Because this is a sister pattern to the one I just shared, it does have the same suggested yarn, Felcolana Arwetta, although reading the pattern description, it doesn't look like the picot edge is done with the fingering weight yarn held single, so I think you can sub a single strand of DK weight yarn for this pattern instead if that is all you have. It is knit on 4mm needles, and this headband comes in a range of sizes from baby all the way to adult, so again, you can really customize this to whoever your recipient is. Headbands, I think, are a great gift just because they keep you warm. They're faster to knit than a hat, especially if your recipient spends a lot of time outside, whether they're walking their dog or going on a morning run before work. A headband is a really practical thing to own. Oh, I did also forget to mention both of those Laura Penrose patterns are paid patterns. Next, we'll move into 2 different beanie patterns that I will share. The first one is called the Classic Ribbed Hat by Purl Soho. You might have heard of this pattern. It definitely is really popular, but it's popular for a reason. It's just a great staple ribbed beanie that I think would be a great gift to give this holiday season. It is also a free pattern on Purl Soho's website, which would explain its popularity. It is a 1x1 all over ribbed hat knit in DK weight yarn. It does come in a wide variety of sizes, ranging from baby all the way to adult large, so you really can pick any size to knit for any person in your life this season. You can choose to knit it really long if you want to get that double folded brim, or if you don't have enough time or enough yarn, you can of course just opt for a single folded brim. This just looks really classy if you knit it in a neutral color, or you can pair a bunch of different colors together for a really fun striped hat. I would say this pattern is pretty beginner friendly. If you're comfortable knitting in the round and knitting and purling, then you probably can do this pattern. It has a very simple crown decrease at the top, and it's just going to be a great go-to staple beanie. The suggested yarn is Purl Soho's DK Cashmere Merino Bloom. However, of course, any DK weight wool I think would be a great substitute for this pattern. And this pattern is knit on 3.25mm needles. Now, if you want to knit a beanie, but maybe the idea of a DK weight hat on 3.25mm needles is just too small of a gauge and too long of a project for you, this next beanie I think would be a great option. And this is the Wildwood beanie by Emily Sheehan of Woolly Bear Knits. This is another classic 1x1 ribbed beanie. It does have sort of a nice crown shaping where you have the single panel and the decreases that go into the panel at the top, so it creates sort of like a pointed flat top. This knitting pattern actually comes in 3 different yarn yarn weights. So you buy one pattern and you get the pattern for all these different yarn weights, ranging from light bulky, bulky to super bulky. So if you're knitting the bulky version, you're going to be knitting with 5.5mm needles, and suggested yarn ideas include Malabrigo Mecca or We Are Knitters the Petite Wool. If you're opting for the bulky version, you will be using 6.5mm needles, and suggested yarns include Ba Sequoia or a similar category weight 5 yarn. And if you go for the super bulky version, this is going to be knit on 9mm needles, and yarn ideas include Malabrigo Rasta or We Are Knitters the Wool, anything of that very super bulky variety. So obviously this hat is going to knit up super quickly. It is all over 1x1 rib, and it features a single folded brim, but if you have more yarn, you can definitely opt for a double folded brim, which is pretty trendy these days. This is a paid for pattern, and skills needed to knit it include knitting 1x1 rib in the round and doing both knit and purl decreases both through the back loop and through the front loops. Now we'll move on to items for the neck, including scarves and little shawls. So the first scarf that I have to recommend is the Elysian blanket scarf by Alexandra Tavel of Two of Wands. I think blanket scarves are really fun to both knit and give because they're really big and oversized, so they're very comfy to snuggle up in, either as a scarf or as sort of like a lap blanket if they work in a cold office or work from home and need something to keep them a little bit warm. This is a great option to knit up. The Elysian blanket scarf is a bulky weight pattern. It's knit on 8mm needles, so although it is a lot of fabric, it knits up very quickly in this really nice all over chevron pattern. The chevron pattern is made entirely with just knit and purl stitches, so this is a very beginner friendly pattern. If you know how to knit flat and know how to knit and purl, you can knit this pattern. The suggested yarn is Lion Brand Hue and Me, which is a bulky weight wool acrylic blend. It's very soft. I have used it before. I've actually knit this pattern before and I really enjoyed it, so take that as a personal recommendation from me. This is a paid for pattern, and you will also need to be comfortable reading a chart to knit the pattern. And this is definitely something that you can customize. If you have more yarn and want to make it longer, or you have less yarn and want to make it smaller, you definitely can. The next pattern I have to share is also a blanket scarf, also by Alexandra Tavel of Two of Wands, and this is the Campfire blanket scarf. Now this is a free pattern on her blog, or you can purchase the ad-free PDF version, and this, again, with similar attributes to the pattern I just shared, it's just a really nice oversized piece of knit fabric that you can use as a lap blanket or as a scarf or as a wrap this colder season. It is an Aran weight knit on 9mm needles, so again, large piece of fabric, but it's going to knit up really quickly. So this is knit flat, and it's actually all garter stitch, so extremely beginner friendly, and it will knit up really quickly on those big chunky needles. The suggested yarn is Lion Brand Fisherman's Wool, which is a 100% wool, and it is pretty thick, so it will make a really nice cozy blanket scarf. I really like the accents on this blanket scarf, which include just a little bit of weaving at the end to add these sort of contrast stripes against the garter stitch stripes that you'll be knitting, and also the fringe at the ends of the blanket scarf also make it look really polished and finished. You could knit this in a neutral color palette like the sample shown here, or you could pick a variety of colors that would suit your recipient best. Now, if you're looking for a scarf that maybe is a little bit more elegant, a little bit more classy, and not super oversized, then I would recommend to you the Laulu shawl by Sari Nordlund. This is a really nice sort of small triangular shaped shawl with all over cables and texture that can be both worn around the neck, like seen here, or around the head, sort of like a balaclava, which I think would be really useful in the winter. This is a paid for pattern, and the yarn used is a DK weight yarn. Suggestions include knitting for olive merino held together with a strand of knitting for olive silk mohair. You could also sub any sort of DK weight yarn for that, and it's knit on 4mm needles. There is one size listed in this pattern, however I have read in some project descriptions that it is a repeat pattern, so you can just choose to include or omit more or less cable repeats to make the shawl longer or shorter depending on your time restrictions and yarn restrictions. This is definitely a more intermediate to advanced level pattern considering all of the texture and the cables going on. You should be comfortable reading those sort of charts. I think Sari Nordlund usually writes out her cable and lace patterns both in chart form and written form in her patterns, so that might be the case with this one, that you have an option as to what you want to follow. merino, but it is knit flat, so basic increasing and decreasing is also involved. Now we'll move into items for the feet, and those would be socks. So I have 2 sock patterns to share with you guys, and they are both DK weight socks because I think for gifting, sometimes fingering weight socks, you have to knit 2 of them, and that can be a lot of time put into it. But DK weight socks knit up twice as quickly, and they give just a really cozy, cushy fabric that I think is really practical for gifting this holiday season. So the first DK weight sock pattern I'll recommend are the Bear Paw socks by Andrea Mowry. These are a toe-up all over 2x2 ribbed sock pattern that I have knit multiple times. I actually gifted these last year for last Christmas to my family, and I had a really good time both knitting them and gifting them. I think the ribbing in the socks is really practical for gift socks because they really snug and hug the shape of the foot. So if you're not super sure of the size foot of your recipient, the ribbing kind of helps and gives you some grace with the fit of the final sock. Andrea Mowry shows 2 different samples in her photos. One is knit with 2 different colors of fingering weight sock yarn. She does sort of like a marling effect, which I think looks really cool, but you also can knit this with 1 color DK weight yarn. Now for DK weight sock yarn, there are some varieties, but I think most people will just use fingering weight sock yarn held double. Andrea suggests the Farmer's Starter Fibers Bear Paw sock yarn, which I think inspired the name for the Bear Paw socks. There are 11 different sizes in this pattern, so you really could knit this for anyone that you need to gift something to, and they are knit on 3.5mm needles. Now these are toe-up socks that are knit with a magic loop, and they include a fleagle heel, definitely more of an advanced pattern. If you have never knit socks before, this might not be the pattern for you to try at first, but if you're comfortable knitting with socks, and even if you haven't done toe-up socks before, I would recommend this pattern. This was my first toe-up sock pattern, and I thought it was pretty easy and straightforward to follow. The other DK weight sock pattern I'll recommend are called Laid Edges by Kellie Macpherson. Now this is your more traditional construction cuff down with a heel flap and gusset sock, but it features this really nice sort of cable line that goes along the side of the sock. Besides that, it is mostly a stockinette sock, so would go pretty quickly, save for the little detail on the side here, but I think it gives it a really classy twist. This is a free pattern on Ravelry, which is really cool, and it does come in 3 adult sizes, and the suggested yarn is West Yorkshire Spinner's Fleece Blueface Leicester DK, and it's knit on 3mm needles. It does say here in the pattern description that there is a linked video to the pattern designer's Instagram where she demonstrates how to do the cable stitch. So if you're comfortable knitting socks and want to try something new with this cable detail, then I would recommend this pattern to you. Okay, the last 2 patterns I have to share are in the category of home, and I think home goods are really a good thing to gift. They're easy because you don't have to worry about the size of the recipient, and it's usually really nice to put something handmade on display in someone's home. They actually are both felted baskets, which I think would be both really fun to knit because felting is really cool, where you purposely wash your knit so it shrinks up and becomes sort of this felted fabric. And it's also really cool to give because I think at first glance people wouldn't know that it's hand knit, and so it would be a really cool surprise when you tell them, oh, I actually made this. So the first pattern is called Wool Vessel, and it's by Nick Davis. This is a paid for pattern, and it is your basic knit round basket, and it looks like there are little handles, which I think are really cute. Now this is knit in the round and garter stitch, so pretty beginner friendly. It is knit with Aran weight wool. The suggested yarn is Lion brand Fisherman's Wool, and you knit this on 5mm needles. The wool vessel comes in 1 size, and after felting, the finished dimensions of the basket is 6 inches tall by 9 inches in diameter. That's about 15 centimeters by 23 centimeters. I think you can play around with this pattern a lot depending on the yarn that you use. Fisherman's Wool does come in some sort of marled yarns, which I think make this really cool tweedy texture in the final felted basket. You can also opt for a more solid color to give you a more uniform look when you're done. If you're not familiar with felting, you definitely want to use a more rustic wool. The rougher and toothier it is, I think the better it felts in general. And if you're looking for something similar to the felted basket, but maybe you're looking for something a little bit more exciting, maybe more in theme with the holidays, then I will turn you to this pattern called, it has a weird name, but it's called 0-1332 Holiday Project, and it's a free pattern by Drops Design. You can see it's the same sort of shape of a felted basket, but it features this really nice sort of snowflake colorwork pattern. So if you're into colorwork and want to add this to your felted basket, I think this would be really nice. This also would knit up pretty quickly, even quicker than the other basket because it's knit with super bulky yarn. The suggested yarn is Drop Snow, and it's knit on 8mm needles. This has approximately the same dimensions as the other felted vessel, and the finished dimensions are a 9-inch diameter by 5.5-inch height. That's about 23 centimeters by 14 centimeters. This is a free pattern on the Drops website. This is knit in the round, and you would want to be familiar and comfortable with color work to complete this chart. And I think what's cool about this is that you really could do any sort of color work chart and apply it to a felted basket. If you're not really into the snowflake or want to do something that's more personalized to the recipient, then you totally could find a different color work motif and then add that into your knit basket. And that brings us to the end of the pattern roundup. I hope you guys enjoyed the patterns that I shared, maybe found some inspiration for your gift knitting. Maybe you're not gift knitting this year, but maybe you're just going to knit something for yourself, which is totally cool. And like I mentioned before, all of these patterns will be linked below in the description box, as well as bundled into a Ravelry bundle. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Happy knitting. Bye.